later. But what was your understanding of the Scottish Government's policy on the use and retention of informal messaging, such as WhatsApp or text messages or other such things during the course of the pandemic?
As you've heard, the record retention policy was that you could use informal messaging systems for Scottish Government business. If you did, you should ensure that any advice or any decisions or anything that should be in the corporate record was then placed in that corporate record by email, briefing, etc. And then you should then delete the informal messaging, and that's the guidance I followed.
Right. So you mentioned there that advice or decisions should be transferred by those mechanisms. What about discussions relating to the management of the pandemic?
I think that's subjective, but I think the core advice and so for instance, the conversation with Jim McMenamin around the national IMT and what levels each place should be at would then be taken by Jim to the national IMT, and that would form the corporate record for that decision making, and that WhatsApp message could then be deleted and should be deleted according to the guidance.
Just to be clear, my question was directed less at the subjective interpretation, which you helped us with, but more whether your understanding was that there was a requirement to retain messages which related to discussions salient to your business in the Scottish Government.
I think there was a requirement to keep salient information and put it in the corporate record. I don't think there was a requirement to take word for word what was in the informal messaging and place it into the corporate record. But once decisions, advice had been constructed, I think you were then required, according to the guidance, to place that in an email or a briefing or in a meeting with a minister or whatever the next step might have been. So
your position was that you're required to retain the decisions or evidence of the decisions which had been taken in the corporate record, and also you had to retain advice which had been given for the corporate record. But beyond that, any discussions salient to the business of the Scottish Government which you've been involved did not require to be retained. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could I just refer to your statement, which is INQ 000273981? This is the one from the 15th of November. And in response to question 23 at page 10, you say, except for direct messages from my Twitter account, I have not retained any one-to-one informal communications in relation to the management of the pandemic in Scotland. This is because I followed the policy described in more detail above in answer to question 14. So you used text messages, WhatsApp messages, is that right?
That's correct.
But you did not retain them above and beyond the interpretation of the policy that you've just set out for us.
Correct.
Ken Thompson, from whom we've heard, says, I feel moved at this point to remind you that this channel is FOI recoverable. And then there is a picture of what looks like a face with a mouth zipped over. And then someone called Penelope, who I think is Penelope Cooper, who's identified just above that, says, clear the chat. Jim McMenamin says, happy to do so. LAN reduced from 51 to 39, but fair comment. To which you say, WhatsApp deletion is a pre-bed ritual. Why did you think that daily deletion of messages was appropriate?
It's a slightly flippant and it's an exaggeration. I didn't daily delete my WhatsApp. My position is, as I've just described to you, that I tried to do today's work today, and if I could assure myself that that work had been managed and dealt with, then I deleted the informal messaging that had led to that moment. But this was a flippant exaggeration in an informal messaging group, and it wasn't done every day before I went to bed.